My brothers and sisters in the light, I need to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly in your heart. Does your money run out before the month ends? Do you find yourself again and again with days or even weeks remaining before your next income arrives, but your resources have already disappeared? Do you experience that familiar sinking feeling when you check your accounts and realize that somehow, despite your best efforts, despite your careful calculations, despite your sincere attempts to manage wisely, there is simply not enough to cover what remains? Have you ever wondered why this happens? Have you ever asked yourself how money that seemed sufficient at the beginning of the month could vanish so completely before the month concludes? Have you ever felt like there is some invisible drain, some hidden leak, some mysterious force that is pulling your resources away faster than any natural explanation could account for? If this describes your situation, if this pattern has repeated in your life for months or years or even decades, if you have tried everything you can think of to break this cycle and nothing has worked, then what I am about to share with you today may change everything, because the Dead Sea Scrolls contain an explanation for this exact phenomenon, an explanation that scholars have overlooked, an explanation that religious leaders have never emphasized, an explanation that has nothing to do with your income level, nothing to do with your budgeting skills, nothing to do with unexpected expenses or bad luck or economic conditions or any of the other excuses we tell ourselves when we cannot understand why our money disappears. The Essenes, who lived near the Dead Sea over 2,000 years ago, understood why money runs out before it should. They observed this pattern in the people around them. They documented this phenomenon in their sacred writings. They identified the spiritual cause behind this material symptom. And most importantly, they developed specific, practical, repeatable practices that broke this pattern completely and permanently for everyone who applied them faithfully. For over 200 years, no member of the Essene community experienced this cycle of mysterious depletion. Their resources lasted. Their provision endured. Their money, such as they had, never ran out before it was supposed to. While neighboring communities experienced the same frustrating cycle that you experience today, the Essenes had solved the problem. They knew something that others did not know. They practiced something that others did not practice. And the results spoke for themselves across 2 centuries of consistent provision. Today, I am going to reveal what the scrolls say about why this happens to you. I am going to explain the spiritual mechanism behind this material problem, a mechanism so logical and clear that once you understand it, you will wonder how you never saw it before. And I am going to give you the exact practices the Essenes used to break this pattern forever, practices you can begin implementing today, before this video ends, before the sun sets on this day. Let me begin by describing what the scrolls call the Cycle of Depletion, a term that appears in multiple Essene documents and clearly refers to the exact experience so many people have with their resources even in our modern age. The Essenes observed that many people, perhaps most people, experienced a predictable pattern with their resources. At the beginning of each period, whether weekly or monthly, resources would arrive. There would be a moment of relief, perhaps even a feeling of abundance. Bills could be paid. Needs could be met. There might even be something left over, creating hope that this time would be different. But then something would happen. The resources would begin to drain faster than expected. Small expenses would arise that had not been anticipated. Unexpected needs would appear from nowhere. The money would flow out in ways that seemed beyond control or explanation, and inevitably, before the next provision arrived, the resources would be gone. The person would be left anxious, stressed, counting days until the next income, wondering how they would bridge the gap, hoping nothing else would go wrong before relief arrived. This cycle would repeat endlessly, month after month, year after year, sometimes for entire lifetimes. The person would try everything to break the pattern. They would budget more carefully. They would cut expenses. They would seek additional income. They would consult advisors. They would read books and follow systems. Nothing worked. The money still ran out before the month ended. The cycle continued with relentless predictability. The Essenes asked a profound question that most people never think to ask. Why does this happen? If the provision at the beginning of the period is mathematically sufficient for the period, why does it not last? Where does the money go? Why does it seem to evaporate? Their answer, documented in the scrolls, will surprise you. The problem is not material. The problem is spiritual. The cycle of depletion is caused by a specific spiritual condition that the Essenes called the leaking vessel. Let me explain what this means using an image you will immediately understand. Imagine a vessel, a jar or a bucket, designed to hold water. If the vessel is intact, if there are no cracks or holes or damage, it will hold whatever you pour into it. The water will remain until you deliberately pour it out or use it for some purpose. The vessel retains what it receives. But imagine that the vessel has cracks. Imagine there are holes that you cannot see from the outside. Imagine there is damage that is not visible but is very real. What happens then? No matter how much water you pour in, it will slowly leak out through the invisible damage. You fill it to the top, but hours later it is half empty. You fill it again, but it drains again. No matter how often you refill it, the water never remains. The problem is not insufficient water. The problem is a damaged vessel that cannot retain what it receives. The Essenes taught that human beings are spiritual vessels designed to receive and retain provision. When our spiritual condition is healthy, when our vessel is intact, we retain what we receive. Resources remain available until we deliberately use them for their intended purposes. There is no mysterious leakage, no unexplained depletion, no money that disappears without trace. But when our spiritual condition is damaged, when there are cracks in our vessel that we may not even be aware of, then provision leaks out. Money flows away. Resources deplete faster than they should. We experience the cycle of depletion not because we receive too little, but because we cannot retain what we receive. The vessel is cracked. This teaching revolutionizes the understanding of financial struggle. Most people assume that running out of money means they need more money, so they seek higher income, additional jobs, better opportunities. But if the problem is a leaking vessel, more money will not solve it. More water poured into a cracked jar still leaks out. The solution is not more provision, but repair of the vessel that receives provision. What causes cracks in our spiritual vessel? The Essenes identified 5 specific causes that are documented clearly in the scrolls. First cause, ingratitude. When we receive provision without genuine gratitude, we create cracks in our vessel. Gratitude is not just polite behavior. It is spiritual adhesive that seals our vessel and allows us to retain what we receive. Every time provision arrives and we fail to truly thank God for it, the vessel weakens. Over time, ingratitude creates significant cracks through which resources leak continuously. Second cause, anxiety about provision. When we worry constantly about money, when we live in fear of lack, when our minds are consumed with financial stress, we create cracks through which provision escapes. The Essenes taught that anxiety itself repels and expels provision. The very fear of running out of money causes money to run out. Third cause, misuse of previous provision. When we have used money in the past for purposes that violated our conscience or God's intentions, we damage our vessel. Every purchase that we knew was wrong, every expenditure that served addiction or sin or harm, weakened the vessel's integrity. These past misuses continue to affect our ability to retain resources. Fourth cause, failure to honor the principle of first fruits. The Essenes taught that the first portion of every provision belongs to God and must be returned to Him through giving. When we consume all our resources without honoring this principle, we crack our vessel. Fifth cause, comparison and envy. When we constantly compare our provision to others, when we feel envy toward those who have more, we damage our vessel. Contentment seals the vessel. Envy cracks it. Before I explain how to repair these cracks, let me share something important. The complete vessel repair protocol from the Essene scrolls has been compiled into my 21-day program called the Essene Wealth Code, 21 Days to Financial Freedom. The link is in the description below. Now let me teach you the 5 practices the Essenes use to repair a leaking vessel. These practices are simple but powerful. They cost nothing to implement. They require no special equipment or training. Anyone can begin them today. Practice 1. The Gratitude Seal. Each time provision arrives, whether large or small, stop everything you are doing and speak genuine thanks out loud. Do not simply acknowledge the provision mentally and move on to planning how to use it. Speak audible words of gratitude. Feel the gratitude in your heart, not just in your mind. Let the thankfulness fill you completely before you do anything else with what you have received. The Essenes would stand, face east toward the rising sun, hold the provision in their hands if possible, and say these words: I thank you for this provision. I receive it with a grateful heart. I acknowledge you as my source and my supply. They would remain in this posture of gratitude for at least 1 full minute, letting the thankfulness settle deep into their spirits before using or storing the provision. This practice seals cracks caused by ingratitude. Practice 2. The Anxiety Release. Each time you feel anxiety about money rising in your mind, stop immediately and consciously release it before it can create or widen cracks in your vessel. Speak out loud, even if you are alone. I release this anxiety. My provision comes from God who knows my needs before I ask. I trust Him to provide what I need when I need it. Worrying will not add a single day to my resources, but it will crack my vessel and cause leakage. I choose trust over fear. The Essenes practiced this release multiple times throughout every day, whenever anxiety arose. They understood that even a few minutes of sustained financial worry was enough to create new cracks or widen existing ones. They interrupted anxiety immediately before it could do damage. Practice 3. The Confession of Misuse. Take time to identify past misuses of provision that may be creating ongoing leakage in your vessel. Think honestly about purchases that violated your conscience. Remember expenditures that you knew were wrong even as you made them. Recall money spent on things that harmed you or others. Confess these specifically to God. Do not speak in generalities. Name the specific misuses. Ask for forgiveness sincerely. Commit to different choices going forward. This confession seals cracks caused by past violations. Practice 4. The First Portion Offering. From every provision before any other use whatsoever, set aside the first portion for God. Not the leftovers, not what remains after bills and necessities. The first portion, taken before anything else is paid or purchased. This can be given to those in need, to religious purposes, to any use that honors God rather than self. The specific amount matters less than the priority. It must be first, always first. If you are finding value in these ancient secrets, take a moment to subscribe to this channel and tap the notification bell. Every week, I reveal another practice from the caves of Qumran. And I want you to do something right now. In the comments below, type, I understand the pattern. When you type this, you are acknowledging that you recognize the cycle of depletion in your own life and are ready to break it forever. Type it now. I understand the pattern. Practice 5. The Contentment Declaration. Each morning when you wake and each evening before you sleep, speak declarations of contentment over your life and your provision. Say these words with conviction. What I have is enough. I am grateful for my portion. I do not need what others have. I do not envy those with more. My provision is exactly what God intends for me today, and it is sufficient for this day's needs. The Essenes understood that contentment is not passive acceptance of poverty. It is not resignation or giving up on improvement. It is active spiritual warfare against the envy and comparison that crack our vessels. Contentment is a declaration of trust and satisfaction that seals the vessel against leakage caused by covetousness. Practice it deliberately, consistently, twice every day. Now let me tell you about a man who learned these practices and broke the cycle of depletion that had plagued him for decades. This account comes from Essene records and demonstrates that even the most severe, most entrenched cases of leaking vessels can be completely repaired. In the Essene records, there is an account of a man named Ezra who came to the community in middle age, desperate and defeated after decades of inexplicable, frustrating financial struggle that nothing could resolve. He had worked hard his entire adult life. He had never been lazy or irresponsible. He rose early every day before sunrise and labored diligently until after sunset. He had earned reasonable wages throughout his working years, sometimes even good wages by the standards of his time. By all natural calculation, by any reasonable expectation based on decades of consistent labor, he should have accumulated substantial savings over the years. He should have built real security against hard times. He should have created margin and reserves that would give him peace. But he had nothing. Absolutely nothing to show for over 20 years of continuous, exhausting labor. Every single month, without exception, the money ran out before the month ended. He would receive his wages and feel momentary relief, sometimes even a flicker of hope that this month would finally be different. But within days, sometimes within hours, the money would begin to disappear in ways he could never fully track or explain. Small expenses would arise. Prices seemed higher than expected. Needs appeared without warning. By the middle of the month, he would be calculating anxiously, wondering how to stretch what remained. By the third week, he would be skipping meals and postponing necessities. By the end of the month, he would have nothing left and would wait in misery for the next wages to arrive so the exhausting, demoralizing cycle could begin once more. Every single year ended exactly as it began, with nothing saved, nothing accumulated, nothing built despite 12 months of grueling effort. His situation never improved, no matter how hard he worked or how carefully he tried to manage. Good years and bad years ended the same way, with empty hands, an anxious heart, and growing despair. Ezra had tried absolutely everything he could think of to break this pattern. He had tracked every single expense with meticulous detail. He had cut every luxury, every comfort, every pleasure that could possibly be eliminated. He had worked additional jobs whenever he could find them. He had consulted with successful people who seemed to manage money well. Nothing worked. The money still disappeared with relentless, almost supernatural consistency. It seemed magical in its vanishing, as if some invisible demon of poverty was draining his resources faster than he could possibly earn them. When Ezra finally came to the Essene community seeking help, the community elders spoke to him about something he had never considered: his spiritual vessel. They asked him questions that seemed strange at first, questions that appeared to have nothing whatsoever to do with money as he understood it. Did he truly thank God when provision arrived, or did he simply acknowledge it and immediately begin planning how to use it? Did he worry constantly about money, or was his mind at peace regarding provision? Had he misused resources in the past in ways that violated his conscience or dishonored God? Did he give the first portion back to God before any other use? Or did he handle his obligations first? Did he compare himself constantly to others who seemed to have more? Or was he genuinely content with his own portion? As Ezra answered each question honestly, sometimes for the first time in his life admitting truths he had hidden even from himself, he began to see a devastating pattern he had never recognized before. He realized with shock that he had never truly thanked God for anything in his entire adult life. Provision arrived, and he immediately began calculating how to use it, his mind racing with anxiety about whether it would be enough. Thanksgiving was mechanical words, ritual without heart, form without meaning. He realized that his mind was utterly consumed with financial anxiety every waking hour of every single day. Money was his first thought upon waking and his last thought before sleeping. He calculated constantly, worried endlessly, imagined disasters that had not happened. His mind was a factory of financial fear producing anxiety without ceasing. He realized there were past expenditures he was deeply ashamed of, money spent on things that violated his conscience, resources wasted on pleasures that had left him feeling guilty and empty afterward. He had tried to forget these misuses, but they remained, creating ongoing shame and spiritual damage. He realized he had never in his entire life given the first portion of anything to God. He always paid his bills first, bought necessities first, handled obligations first. God received leftovers, which meant God received nothing. He realized he constantly compared himself to neighbors who had more, felt bitter envy toward relatives who appeared more prosperous, resented friends whose resources seemed to last when his did not. Comparison and envy were his constant companions, poisoning every moment. The elders listened and then told Ezra something that shocked him. His vessel was not just cracked, it was utterly shattered. There were so many holes, so many wounds, so many points of leakage that no wonder provision could not remain in his possession for even a few weeks. Everything he received drained out immediately through 100 self-inflicted wounds accumulated over decades of unconscious patterns. The problem was not his income. The problem was his shattered vessel. They taught him the 5 practices of vessel repair and told him to continue for 40 days without exception, no matter what, regardless of how he felt or whether he saw immediate results. Ezra was deeply skeptical but absolutely desperate. He had nothing left to lose. What possible harm could it do to try? He began the practices that same day. At first he felt foolish speaking words of gratitude out loud for small amounts of money. He felt awkward releasing anxiety verbally when worry arose in his mind. He felt deeply uncomfortable confessing past misuses that he had tried so hard to forget. He felt strong resistance to giving the first portion when there seemed to be barely enough for basic necessities. He felt strange declaring contentment when he felt anything but content inside. But he persisted exactly as the elders had instructed, day after day, week after week, for 40 days without a single interruption, without excuse, without exception. The change began slowly but became increasingly undeniable as the days passed. By the end of the second week, his constant anxiety was noticeably reduced. His mind, which had raced with financial worry for decades, was beginning to quiet. By the end of the third week, his gratitude was becoming genuine rather than forced. He actually felt thankful instead of merely reciting empty words. By the fourth week, he checked his resources and made an astonishing discovery that nearly stopped his heart. For the first time in over 2 decades of adult life, there was still money in his possession at the end of the month. Not much, but some. A real amount he could see and count. The leakage had slowed dramatically. The vessel was beginning to hold what it received. By the end of the 40 days, Ezra wept with profound relief and amazement. The cycle of depletion that had tormented him for over 20 years, that had stolen his peace and crushed his hope, was finally broken. His income had not increased. His basic expenses had not dramatically decreased. But his vessel was healing, and provision was finally remaining rather than mysteriously leaking away. He continued the 5 practices faithfully for the rest of his life. He never again experienced the old pattern of running out before the month ended. He even began to accumulate modest savings for the first time in his entire existence, not because he earned more than before, but because he could finally retain what he received. The vessel was sealed. The cycle was broken forever. This same transformation is available to you starting today. If money runs out before your month ends, you are living the cycle of depletion. You have been trying material solutions for a spiritual problem. You have been pouring water into a cracked vessel. The 5 practices I shared today can seal your vessel. Begin today. Practice all 5 for 40 days. Watch what happens. If you are ready for complete transformation, the Essene Wealth Code will guide you. The link is in the description. Before you leave, type, "I understand the pattern. My brothers and sisters in the light, remember what the scrolls reveal. Running out of money before the month ends is not a sign you need more income. It is a sign of a leaking vessel. The Essenes never experienced this cycle because they maintained their vessels. For 200 years their provision lasted. The same is possible for you. The practices are revealed. The vessel can be repaired. The cycle can be broken. May the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob seal every crack in your vessel. May provision remain. May the cycle of depletion end forever. Go in peace. Go in power. Go in prosperity. Until next time, this is Rabbi Enoch, keeper of the scrolls, servant of the light. Shalom.